Some type of storm this week. Yes?
Yes.
So whether if you chose to stay here, that was your impulse, then you went through a storm. If you chose to leave and that was your guidance, I would think that was harder because you weren't here. And you might have been listening to some weather channel. And mostly it would have been harder for me. And then getting back. Returning was a challenge for many of you, and you're here, and you did it, and you got through it. So that is something to celebrate. So let's just take a moment to celebrate that. We came through the storm.
Came through the storm.
Yeah, we did it. Each one of us that are here did it. And there are people who are still working to get back, who are still in that process of trying to get back. Now, I was watching Facebook. And on Facebook, somebody posted, the hurricane is because of mass consciousness. And I'm like, wow, do I believe that? Is that true? Let me think about that for a minute. So I started thinking about that, and I thought, well, I do have some swirling thoughts. And they can get going, and they can go and go and go and go and go. And I have some feelings that will do the same thing, swirl and swirl. I might find myself feeling angry, and I have to get to a certain level of my own anger to be able to shift that pattern. It's like, boom, and then I can shift it. Same thing with fear. There's a certain amount of fear that rises before I can shift that pattern. So as the hurricane was coming, and I'm thinking about all this, I think I'm going to make a commitment to myself and the universe in this moment that I'm going to find my center in every moment I can in this hurricane. I'm going to find the peace within me in every moment I can in this hurricane. Well, it wasn't always easy. As the storm was approaching, we start getting emails, we start getting texts, we start getting Facebook messages, and then just blatantly on Facebook, get out of Dodge. And we tuned in. Do we go? Do we stay? Let's take it into meditation. And we never got a clear yes, so we stayed. We never got that clear yes. And part of what Mindy and I do is if it's not a yes, if it's not a very clear yes, it's a no. So that was our choice. And as it got closer, more and more people were texting us and Facebook messages us and emailing us. And the more anxiety that was going out there, the more anxiety I noticed I was feeling in here. So then I would have to recommit. Recommit to that peace. Recommit to practicing the presence of God in my life. So it was a journey for me. So here's what happens. I started looking at my fear patterns. Well, what I discovered is they show up around 3 or 4 in the morning. And I am not an early bird. I'm a night owl. But 4 o'clock in the morning, boom, I would wake up and I would be absolutely paralyzed with fear. So paralyzed, I was having difficulty thinking. And I started trying to do the prayer for protection. Now, I've been in Unity for 10 years, and every week in Unity we do the prayer for protection. And I cannot remember the prayer for protection when I was paralyzed with fear. I knew there was something about, let me think. Oh, I know, I got it. Oh, love, there's something about love, but I don't think that comes first. There must be something else, power. I don't think that comes first either. But what I started to notice was it didn't matter the order of the words. There was love. Love is the master healer. I can say that easily to you now, but in those moments I couldn't. Light. The light of God surrounds us. Oh, I finally got that one. The light of God surrounds me. Oh, and I am the light of God. But it took time. It took energy. It took effort. And it was so beautiful when I could actually pull it up from within. So in Unity, we talk about a transcendent God and we talk about an immanent God, that God within. The light of God surrounds us. So I knew that spiritual intelligence was around me. That's the metaphysical term for light. Spiritual intelligence. I knew it was all around me. But when I could actually say, I am light. I am the light of God. I knew that within me was also that spiritual intelligence. It took that balance of finding the outer as well as the inner for me to be able to reduce the fear. So over and over in the mornings when I wake up, 4 a.m. and then one morning it was 5 a.m. and it was 4 a.m. I would start that. Oh my gosh, I am so scared. And I would be paralyzed, laying in bed. And it took me a while to come up with the terminology, but I got it. And then after a while, I would shift to the Aramaic Lord's Prayer. Mother, Father, birther and breath of all, create a space inside me and fill it with your presence. Well, I knew enough by that time that if I am filled with the presence of God, then I'm also aware of the presence of God that's within me. So it was a matter of really working principle. And then I would quietly get out of bed and I would go upstairs to my favorite recliner and I would sit and I could meditate. And once I meditated, it's like no more fear, no more paralyzed, no more hurry up, get the cats, get it, let's go. Not that, because my internal impulse and my guidance was not to go. It was not a clear yes, so it was a no. And when we override what is true for us, then we get ourselves in trouble. And I know that. I get myself in trouble when I override my inner guidance, my spiritual guidance. It wasn't always easy. It took a lot of time, but my commitment was to peace. So my commitment to my inner peace was bigger than my commitment to my fear. Now I want to show you a picture of what neurons do under stress. This side right here, your left side, is a normal neuron. So the things that look like branches of trees are called dendrites. A neuron is just $1 million name for a brain cell. And it's the dendrites that make the connections, and they make connections with other dendrites, and there's something called a neurotransmitter that jumps the gap, called a synapse. So that neurotransmitter jumps the gap. Well, when there's a whole bunch of them, it's easy to be in the flow. But when we're under stress, it looks like this. So there's a physiological reason that when we get stressed, we get frozen. Or we get in fight, you know that one? Fight or flight are the normal fear signatures. So we might be in fight or flight, or we get frozen in fear, or we go faint. Which sometimes I did. It's like I couldn't make a decision. What do I do? Well, this is some of the physiology. There's more to it, but this is some of the physiology to it. Now, that's not to say don't ever get in fear. We're going to be in fear. There's times when fear is going to arise. Something happens outside us and we get scared. Something happens in whatever the magnitude of the fear is, we're going to have a response to it. So some of you who know me know I love to say, have your 2 minutes of unenlightened ranting and raving about your fear. Let it out, howl, scream, run around in the house, and do what you would be doing. Like, oh, I gotta do the dishes, I gotta pack the thing, I gotta get the cats ready, I gotta do this. Let yourself do whatever you do to release the fear, and then come back to the principle. Come back to the fact that we are always protected, that there is always one presence and one power. So we're not overriding those human impulses of our fear. It's important to express it. And you may find in unity, this happens sometimes, is that people say, oh, you don't want to get in fear because that's a vibration. Yes, it is a vibration. But it's very much a vibration constricted as it is a vibration expressed. And if you've expressed it and it's no longer in your body and it's moved on through you, you're not walking around in the constriction of fear. It makes a difference. Eric Butterworth says to us, what you experience will always depend on where you are in thought, in consciousness, in feeling, and in self-awareness. We are human beings, but we're also spiritual beings, and our human side is going to have the gamut of emotion. We want to express that and then come right back into our center, and we do that through our practices. Here we do that through prayer, meditation, affirmations. And I tell you, 10 years in unity, in the midst of a big fear, I could not remember the prayer for protection until I could. We can't do it until we can. And that's the thing to celebrate, is that we could, that we did. That's what we celebrate. Or one of us reminds the other. Mindy was great because her fear responses came at a different time than my fear responses. So we balanced each other out. So she could just listen and she could be okay with that. So if you chose to go, if you chose to stay, whatever your choice, Say hallelujah that you made that choice and that you followed that impulse and that you were safe because you're here. Because you're here to be a part of this, to serve in this spiritual community. I want to tell you a couple of stories, actually, and I'm going to combine two stories a little bit. As I thought about this storm, as I thought about the hurricane, I just kept thinking about the two stories of Jesus that I know that had to do with storms. One was when Jesus calmed the storm. Jesus had been teaching with his disciples. He had so many people come that he sat out on a boat and he did the teaching. His disciples are in the teaching. And he talked about the sower and throwing the seed, which is the action of God, on the ground. Do you throw it on the rocks? Do you throw it on the gravel? Do you put it on fertile ground? Now that may remind you of something that we say every week. May these statements be fertile ground from which our future grows. Thank you. I can think from which our life flows. But it's the same kind of thing. Where are we putting our thoughts? Where are we putting ourselves into action? And so Jesus is teaching. He's doing that thing that Jesus does best, teaching and healing in a boat. They're done. Jesus says, let's go across the Sea of Galilee. Well, the Sea of Galilee was known for rampant storms. So Jesus is in the boat. He goes, puts his head on a pillow in the boat. He goes to sleep. And the disciples are there doing whatever they're doing in the boat. And a raging storm comes up. And the wind is howling and the waters are coming into, the waves are actually coming into the boat. And the disciples get really, really scared. So they go wake up Jesus and they say to Jesus, hey, don't you care about us at all? We're going to die here and all you're doing is sleeping. Is that familiar to anybody? How could you be so calm when I'm so upset? How could you not be mad? I'm mad. How come you're not mad? You're supposed to be mad with me. We're partners, right? So the disciples are distraught because what happens is when we're in fear, we interpret the world differently. We see the world differently. So Jesus, we don't know if he stood up or lay down, depends on the translation of the Bible that you're looking at. But Jesus says, peace be still, and everything calms down. And then he says to the disciples, what happened to your faith? What happened to your faith? Well, the walking on water story is very similar. Jesus has been teaching. He finds out his best friend, John the Baptist, has been beheaded. He's very upset. And so he's headed up to the mountaintop to pray. But on the way, here comes crowds. Oh, Jesus is here. Let's get him to teach for us. And so the crowds gather, and Jesus does again. In the midst of chaos, whatever his storm is, whatever our storm is, it may not always look like a hurricane, but in the midst of the storm that Jesus is in the middle of, he stops to do what he does best. He teaches. And he heals. And this is where the story of the 5,000 comes up, where there's 2 loaves and 5 fishes, there's 5 loaves and 2 fishes. A little dyslexic here this morning. But there's loaves and fishes, and they break the bread, and everybody has more than enough. And Jesus goes up to the mountaintop to pray. He tells the disciples, go on out in the boat, cross the Sea of Galilee. So then there's a storm. Jesus comes down from the mountain. There's a storm. He walks out on the water. The disciples are in the boat, and they see this image coming toward them, like, it's a ghost! It's a ghost! So they're frightened. Again, they're interpreting what they're seeing from their place of fear, and so they're going to see it differently. Now, I know some of you guys think it's cool to see ghosts. But the disciples didn't like the idea that it was a ghost. Oh my gosh, it's a ghost, it's a ghost, it's coming to get us. And Jesus is like, hey, you guys, have courage. And as soon as Peter figured out that was Jesus, he's like, hey, I want to come and get on the water with you. And Jesus says, come on. Peter steps out onto the water. He's doing great. He's looking at Jesus. He's walking on the water. And then all of a sudden, he looks down. His fear rises up, and he sinks. Here comes fear. Peter sinks. Jesus reached out his hand, and he caught his hand, and they stepped into the boat together. And the moment they stepped into the boat together, the waves and the wind calm. There's something to be learned from that story. I want to look at it with you metaphysically for just a moment. Fear is a paralyzer of mental action. That's what I was describing to you. When I hit a certain amount of fear, I feel paralyzed. So one of my fear signatures is freeze. The fear throws dust in our eyes and hides the mighty spiritual forces that are always with us and within us. So when we get scared, we have trouble until we're in the practice of spirituality, till we're in the practice of living the laws of spirituality. Then the fear covers up what we know is that one presence and one power, that thing that we affirm every single Sunday. There's only one presence and one power active in the universe and in our lives. God, the good, omnipotence. But when we're in fear, it's much more difficult because metaphysically it has this dust or this whatever is keeping us from seeing clearly all around us. The wind is life currents that come from within and surround the whole being. Now we can simply look at that as vibration. This is what our vibration is. The sea is the great realm of unexpressed and unformed thoughts and ideas that contain potentiality. So when we're in fear with that vibration that can't even see the presence of God within us, that sees whatever we're interpreting, like sees the ghost that the disciples see, when we're there, then think about it. When I'm in fear, what I'm going to express. Because we know that thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. So if I'm in fear and everything I see is startling me, then what I'm going to produce in my line of vision is more fear. I'm going to bring that in. But when I can clear the fear with the boat, the positive thought, then I'm going to look at things differently. And remember, from the boat, from the positive thought, Jesus calmed the winds and the water. And when Peter and Jesus stepped into the boat, when they stepped into the positive thought, and they got in it, and they rode in it, they calmed the waters and the wind. When we're willing to do what it takes to stay in meditation, to stay saying the affirmation, even if it's like a mantra and it's repetitive, until we feel better, we have very much done what Jesus taught us to do. Stayed in the positive thought until something shifts. And as soon as the fear begins to shift, we can look at things and see things differently. Somebody walking on water to us, particularly when it's our teacher, is not going to look like a ghost. It's going to look like our teacher. Hey, I'm so glad you joined us, Jesus. Even if it's across the water. But Jesus had been talking about miracles and doing healings. So it would not be a surprise when we're out of fear to be able to see that. Now, Charles Fillmore says it this way. Blessed are those who deny ignorance and fear and affirm the presence and the power of spirit. Now, this type of denial is not the psychological denial. It's not like, oh, there's no hurricane happening. I'm just going to go and live my life. Oh, there's nothing coming. This kind of denial is to say, what is occurring in front of me? What is happening in life? That something happens in life has no power over me. That's the kind of denial that Charles Fillmore is saying. Fear has no power over me. So say that with me. Fear has no power over me. I'm going to invite you to add that piece of movement so we're totally embodying it. Fear has no power over me. And when we can step with fear has no power over me, then we can begin to affirm that which we know to be true. That the light of God does surround us. The love of God does truly enfold us. The presence of God is always with us, and we are always that light, that love, that presence, and that power. It's outside of us, and it is always within us. And when we can deny that the fear has any power and stay in the affirmative, our life will look differently, even in the midst of the storm, so that wherever we are is perfect because we know that wherever we are, God is. And wherever God is, there is always good. There is always love. I live from my consciousness of the presence and power of Spirit. If you're interested in this and you're willing to live with this and to live from this consciousness, please say this with me. I live from my consciousness of the presence and the power of Spirit. And take a breath into that and let's say it again. I live from my consciousness of the presence and power of Spirit. And here are some things that we can do when we get in stress. And I'm saying we because it's me too. We can remember to breathe. So let's all take a breath together. Science tells us that a cycle of respiration is an inhale and an exhale. And we're doing it constantly. But respiration, breathing is one of those things that we can have conscious awareness of and change our own breathing patterns, or we don't have to think about, and our bodies continue to breathe us. But science also has built in, and our very essence of us has built in the fact that when we breathe 8 to 12 respirations a minute or less, 8 to 12 inhales and exhales a minute or less, it is physiologically impossible to be anxious. So when we engage in this regular practice, then when things start getting scary, we can simply start to breathe and calm ourselves down because it's impossible. It's the way the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system in the body works. Affirm the positive, look for the good, look for things that are occurring. And Mindy and I stood at our dining room window and we said to the trees, we're so grateful for you, for staying rooted, for being grounded, and for being flexible. We stood there and we said that to them over and over. When the power was out, as we were wanting to leave the house and we were trying to figure out how to make the garage door come up and down without electricity, we started saying, I'm so grateful. We're going to feel so happy when the power comes on. It's going to feel like this. And you know, it wasn't seconds till that power came on. Boom, there it was. Meditate. Spend time in meditation because it helps to calm us down. Practice kindness. I was talking to Peg Oxby. Peg, will you raise your hand? I was talking to her after the storm on the telephone, and she started telling me there's a guy across the street from her that has a house generator. And so he never lost any electricity because his generator just kicked right on. And so Peg goes to all her neighbors and she says, hey, do you need your phone charged? Can I charge your devices, your iPad, your laptop? And she was going neighbor to neighbor, getting their devices, going back to her neighbor, having them charged, going back to get them, taking them back to the neighbor, going to another neighbor, and helping. So she was in service right after the storm when it was safe enough for her to go out. Mindy and I saw on Facebook that it was posted by the wife of the Unitarian minister that there was an opportunity to volunteer at Catholic Charities at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. So we head off to Catholic Charities. They've already unloaded the truck, but they say, well, it'd be great if you go help feed. So we went to help feed people who had not had a meal. So we find the place, and it's the Rose of Sharon Deliverance
Salvation Apostolic Ministries.
Okay, so the Rose of Sharon Deliverance Salvation Apostolic Ministries and Outreach. So we don't know these people. We're just walking up. We have unity tags on. And we start talking to them. And the minister of that spiritual community is there. She's helping to serve. And we're chatting and she looks at me and she said, I want to tell you it is not about color. It is about God. And I said, yes. And we worked together side by side for at least 2 hours feeding people. And the people were so grateful. When we step outside of ourselves, when we have the impulse to be of service, then life opens up. We felt so good. It didn't matter that there were trees down and we were coming back here to work on things. It didn't matter that there were things going in our yard that we still need to take care of. We felt great because we had engaged in acts of kindness. Do what you do best, just like Jesus did. Do what you do best. And there is something that you do best. Do more of it. And when you engage in that, everybody benefits because of our oneness. Live full out. We were not put here or brought here. We're not still here to have a hard time in life. It's to find that way, to find that highway, the throughway, to live full out, to have a great time, to have fun. And when people said this, oh, we can't come and work at the church, we're working in our own homes, we said, that's fantastic. Do what you need to do because we all benefit. When we're joyful, it ripples out and it touches everybody, whether consciously aware of it or not. Dance, sing, have fun, celebrate life. The greatest gift that you can give to somebody who is having a hard time is to beam love at them, because love is the master healer, to know their wholeness no matter what they've been through, and to celebrate your life and their life, to celebrate the very fact that here we are having an opportunity to live as fully and as joyfully as we do.